Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our Native Voices in STEM seminar. So before we go ahead and get started and jump straight into the presentation, I'm going to start us off with a land acknowledgement. And so we respectfully acknowledge the University of Arizona is on the land and territories of Indigenous peoples. Today, Arizona is home to 22 federally recognized tribes, with Tucson being home to the O'odham and Yaqui. Committed to diversity and inclusion, the university strives to build sustainable relationships with sovereign Native nations and Indigenous communities through education offerings, partnerships, and community service. Now, the Native Voices in STEM seminar series is co-sponsored by the Indigenous Resilience Center, the University of Arizona, Sloan Indigenous Graduate Partnership, the Water Resources Research Center, the Native Fuse Alliance, and the Office of Societal Impact. This seminar series highlights Native scientists, engineers, educators, leaders, and social activists, providing students with an opportunity to network and learn about the research and careers of Native leaders in various fields. Each session includes a Q&A segment at the end, where all attendees are encouraged to engage with the speaker, ask questions, and participate in the discussion. So today, we are honored to welcome Dr. Vicky Karanikola, who is a researcher and educator with work focusing primarily on water quality, equity, and community-driven solutions. Her work emphasizes collaboration with underserved and Indigenous communities to co-design solutions that address both environmental challenges and local needs. Through her work, Dr. Karanikola illustrates how science and engineering can be paired with lived experiences and traditional knowledge to create sustainable and just outcomes. With that, I will turn it over to Dr. Vicky Karanikola.
Great. Thank you, Jason, for the introduction. Hello, everyone, and thank you, the Native Voices in STEM, for giving me the opportunity to talk to all of you about the work we do with the amazing community of the Monument Valley Park. More specifically, we'll focus on the water side of the fuse systems that we have with the community. And more specifically, we'll talk about the off-the-grid water systems we have. Now, I want to start by acknowledging the multiple funding organizations involved in this project. A lot of this work is actually building up from the Indigifuse. That was an NSF NRT funded program that was led by Dr. Carletta Teef. And it has been continuing with the support of IRIS, the Howry program, TRIP funding from the U of A, and new NSF funding that we have with, again, Dr. Teef and Dr. Kelly Simmons-Potter and other faculty. And I just want to say here that I'm just the lucky one to talk to you about this, because there's so many people that it takes, so many people that they work on this project. Again, I'm just the lucky one here talking to you. Some of the most important and actually the leading role is the actual community in the Monument Valley Park. But we have collaborators from NAU, the Net College, and many others from the U of A and other organizations that make this work possible. And at this point, I really want to acknowledge Dr. Tommy Rock from NAU, who actually I usually give this presentation with. We kind of have given this presentation a couple of times together. And also Neil Roy Singer, Dr. Sazia Tabasung Kim, and Dr. Barbara Klein from the Net College, who are collaborators in this project. And we could have not done that without all those collaborators. Next, I would like to introduce briefly, and this is a very busy slide, I know, but briefly I want to talk about our laboratory and what's our specialties. So our lab, the course lab, the Karanikola Optimized Research for Environmental Sustainability, focuses on water and wastewater process optimization, membrane processes, disinfection processes, all at the energy water nexus. This is what we are going to be talking about today. And then we also work on other projects that they work more on emerging contaminants that we see in the environment, and they affect, now we know, everyone, not only in urban system, but in rural areas. So those are some of the projects that we're working here at our lab. And none of this work will, again, be possible without the real rock stars of our lab, which is all of them. You see them right here. It's the PhD students, the master students, the undergraduate students, the postdocs, and the research scientists that we have in our group. So I definitely want to highlight that part. Okay, a lot of introduction, and now it's the highlight is introducing actually the Monument Valley Park community. The community that we're working with is amazing, if I could describe it in one word. I'll start by saying that they know their land better than anyone. They are the original scientists and engineers of the area for sure. And what we've learned has been pivotal for all the work that we're doing. The community is comprised by 10 households with people residing in the area for multiple generations. And while the community and the area is very close to the Colorado River, there is no central infrastructure for water, basically, for water distribution. Now, energy and water often go hand in hand. So the community does not have access to central infrastructure for water or electricity. In terms of how does the community gets water, they have to drive about 45 minutes in a pretty rough road, I would say. And in the summer, because of the heat and the drought, the use of water increases by a lot. So people might have to actually travel further to get water, because not all watering points might have enough water for all the people that are trying to get water. So summer definitely is harder for the area to have access to water. Okay, so the community has actually been highlighted. This is a very nice article by the Time magazine. Most of the community members that we're working with were featured or talked or were interviewed by the Time magazine, and they talk about those struggles, about the love of their land and the struggles, though, at the same time for the lack of infrastructure that there is in the area. So to move a little bit further, this is again all information from the Time magazine, from the article that was published last year. And what you see here on the left side is actually Effie Yazzie, and she is pumping water from one of the tanks that was installed by Dr. Tommy Rock. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about that and how we are all involved, and we got involved with the community. And the part that I think it's very important to mention here, and was mentioned in the article, while the community of the Monument Valley Park is very close to the Colorado River, right? On the other side of the border, on the Utah side, there's also a community which is about the same distance from the community, from the Monument Valley Park community, that it's a complete contrast from the community. So that reflects, as the article talks, it talks about the inequity in terms of access to water and electricity. If you read the article, you will not only see that the community, that it's the St. George community from the Utah side, that is very close to the Colorado River, is one of the one of the communities that it's growing very rapidly in the US. And when a community grows rapidly, then there is more resources being harvested from the environment, right? So that's to show the striking difference within a few miles, like a pretty close distance. Okay, so let's talk about some background about the community and how did we get involved. But to talk about that, I need to describe the background. And Dr. Tommy Rock, who's a professor at NAU, has been doing extensive work in this area, and specifically with this community, but outside the community of Monument Valley Park as well. He's actually leading 2 nonprofits that have been providing assistance to communities in the area that might not have access to central infrastructure overall. He has worked a lot to provide storage for water from the springs that are in the area, and also some pumping needs. So the picture that you see that Effie is getting water from a tank, that's from a spring that is close by to her house. We'll talk about why this is important, the distance from sources of water. And also Dr. Rock has been working on sanitation projects. So a lot of the houses have now composting toilets. Some of the houses have composting toilets, but with the idea that All of the households will have composting toilets. They're all getting an updated roofing. So that means that people can install solar panels then on the roof, because up until now they probably couldn't. And some of the houses are starting to actually have showers. So running water inside the house, which are very important for quality of life and ensuring that people stay in their homes and in their areas where they love to be. So the Youth Day team, how did we come into the picture? It's when Dr. Ross asked if we could provide assistance in energy, water matters initially. So the first thing we did on the U of A side is we scheduled meetings and traveled to the community to meet and define community needs. And after a couple of meetings, the primary needs were identified. But again, I want to highlight here the importance of sitting quite a few times with the community and just listening. Because again, how I started this presentation is about the knowledge that the community has about their land and understanding how their land works and potentially which sources of water might be better than others, right? So we had a couple of those meetings. Our team learned so many stuff, and we're so thankful for all the information that the community was willing to share with us. So once we had all those meetings, then we started identifying the primary needs, and the primary need initially was to provide the community water quality data of water sources that they are within the park boundaries. And if there were any red flags in terms of the water quality, what can we do in terms of water treatment? Okay, so why is this important? This is very important because what you see here in this map is the two yellow dots that you see are residence homes in the area. And what you see around those residence homes are 3 springs that they are in the community. The majority of the community members, before they found out if those springs were good quality water that they can use, they would actually travel to Goulding, the public watering point, which you see it on the left corner of this image. That takes approximately 45 minutes to get there under good conditions. And in the summer, a lot of the community members, when the Goulding watering point is too busy or there is not enough water, then they will have to actually drive to Cayenta, which is way more than an hour. And actually in Cayeta, you actually have to pay for your water additionally. So there was an additional cost to that. So if we could figure out what's happening with those springs in terms of water quality, then the community will have to drive. Just by seeing 2 examples of residence homes, you can see that it's a lot closer distance. We're talking about 10 minutes within the region. Okay, so that was the primary need, the spring water, then deciding on the water safety. Another big need of the community was more energy so they can potentially have appliances inside their homes. And then the final thing from the discussions that we got was fresh food accessibility, and that will be growing crops or have potential hoop houses or anything that you can grow food. And these were all part of the discussions, and they wanted to start from the water part. So that's how our team came into play. Okay, so let's talk about the water quality. That's the first thing we do. And this is a busy map with a lot of data. So I'll just summarize it to you. So all 3 springs that we tested, the water quality was really good. So exceptional water. Some of the springs might had higher total dissolved solids, so a little bit more saline, but nothing exceeded even the secondary limit based on EPA. So very high quality water. So that means that the community could use that water. Okay, so before we talk about our systems, I'll introduce you to what we have been working on since the Indigifuse time, since our first NSF and RT program. The team has designed 2 off-the-grid treatment systems that we have piloted since we started the projects in the Navajo Nation and in other communities. And the systems are as simple as they look in this figure. Well, all of the components of the systems are built by components of the self, and that's really important because that increases sustainability. So if something breaks down, somebody can go to a store in a city that is close by to buy. It's not something that we've custom made in the lab, so then it's very hard to replicate, or it requires us to travel all the way to a community to do that. So it's pretty accessible to troubleshoot even the systems. While designing and building the systems, we are also creating process models. So we are able to test them and optimize them. And with one of our optimization criteria being to minimize the cost of water, right? So, and I'll talk to you about that metric that we have. So it's efficiency, how good is the water that we can produce, and then how expensive it is. Because if it is more expensive than what the community members are paying, then the system is probably might not be worth it, right? So on the left side of the slide, you'll see our solar nanofiltration systems, which I'm not going to be talking about today because they're not relevant for the water quality we have. But very briefly, if you have very high TDS dissolved salts, if you have high salts basically in your water, or if you have heavy metals, arsenic, uranium, or other things that you do not want to consume, then you would use a system like that, which spends more energy. On the right side are the systems that we're mostly going to be talking about today, and those are our solar UV systems. And they're basically, we design and build the system for situations where the water quality of the source water did not require any removal of salts or of heavy metals, but just needed microbiological treatment before consumption. Because disinfection is something that we do in all waters. And spring water, if it sits in a tank, or any water, the water that you take from the tap, after 3-4 days, it won't have any residual chlorine. So that means that they can have microbiological growth. And this can happen to any water, right? So water from a spring that you store in a tank well, it has no disinfection at all. So you need to disinfect it before you drink it to be safe. Any cold water, any water that you take and store it for more than a couple of days could benefit from a treatment like that, a point of use, basically disinfection. So this is the system that you see here on the right side, and what it does, basically a UV system. It has a lamp, and the water flows outside of the lamp, and you get your finished water, and it's ready for consumption. Something to point out here is that UV disinfection is not like chlorine. That means it doesn't have residual disinfection. That means that if you disinfect it, you have to consume or use the water pretty soon, within, I would say, a couple of hours or in a day, right? So you don't let the water sit. While in chlorine, you can have 3-4 days that the water sits there before you need to re-disinfect it. Okay, so we talked about our systems. The next very important thing is to put in perspective our systems, and this is basically our first results, because the metric of cost of water is really important. And here's how we make our case. The cost of water in Arizona is about 0.2 to 0.4 per 100 gallons in Tucson, Flagstaff, Phoenix. The cost of hauling water back in 2011 was calculated as $13 per 100 gallons. I can tell you that this number is higher now if we bring it to present value. So it might be closer to $20 per 100 gallons. Our group has worked in the past with other processes trying to figure out what's the optimal solution for off-the-grid processes. We had some success, but the water was still expensive. $5 per 100 gallons, I would call it expensive. Cheaper than hauling water, right? Because you have to take into account the travel, the wear and tear of the car, the time that you are not spending doing another activity that is going to bring water. So there's a lot of things that goes into the calculation of that number. So with our processes, the solar nanofiltration unit that is for tougher water that needs more treatment, and our other system, our solar UV treatment, we were able to bring the price down to $1 per 100 gallons. or $0.7 per 100 gallons for the solar UV system. Now, off-the-grid systems will never be able to beat central infrastructure. Central infrastructure, because its economy of scale, will always be cheaper. But those values right now, the cost of water is a lot closer to the values that we would pay in an urban city that you have a big water treatment plant or wastewater treatment plant serving you. Okay, so that's our first result. Figure out what's the cost of water. Now, the second thing I want to talk to you is our project timeline. So how did we go through this project and how did it lead us to more research questions? Okay, so we started this project back in February of 2023. And as I mentioned earlier, we identified the community needs. We did a lot of water sampling. We came back, then we came up with a couple of designs of projects. We took those designs back to the community and to Tommy Rock and to actually the whole community that was there and collaborators. And we had a discussion, is this good? Does this work? What are some things that we could change or we can make better just by looking at the designs? We got feedback, we came back, and then we started co-constructing a system with Diné College, with members from the Diné College. In May, by that year, so things were happening after the first community meetings that we had for a couple of months. Then things started moving pretty fast. And in May, we were able to implement 2 systems. We traveled all of us together, the U of A, Diné College, community members, Dr. Tommy Rock, we were all met in the Monument Valley Park, and we installed 2 systems in 2 households. And we wanted those systems to stay for, excuse me, for quite a bit of while in use, so we could collect some data and see, are they working? Are they working as they're supposed to? What are the comments from the community? So beyond May, then we started a sampling campaign and monitoring those systems and having community discussions. So that brings us to fall of 2024, where we did a full year of all of our testing and our systems, and I'll show you those results that we got. Those were led by Diné College. Then we went back to the U of A and we started redesigning the system based on the feedback that we got from the community members, which was the most important. So the community basically is leading our design. And the second thing is based on the data that we got from the lab in Diné College, what works and doesn't work. So we did some redesigning, and then in spring 2025, we installed 2 more systems in the community. And then in fall, recently we installed 1 more. So there is in total 5 systems right now in the community, with intention to at least install 2 more. And that's because I said there's 10 households. We had interest from at least 7 families or households getting a system. But we have the capacity to provide to all of the homes systems if they would like that. So in spring 2025, we'll install 1 more system and continue doing sampling. Through this whole time, we have been doing sampling of the system and surveying. We started doing surveying. We got a Navajo Nation IRB approval to conduct surveys with the users of the systems, that they have now the systems for quite a bit. If they like it, what works, what doesn't work, and a lot of information that can help us to even more improve the design. So why am I giving you this project timeline? Because I think it's really important that we had the time, we had the funding, and we had the time to be able to have those conversations with the community. And all of those projects, even though the system seems small, it requires a lot of time to figure out what's the best thing for the community. So those systems are fit for purpose, but fit for each family. What do they need? You know, we got feedback that some of the community members didn't like the flavor of the water, and that's because of the plastic tank. So we had to switch tanks. So there's a lot of conversations going back and forward, and we are very thankful for the community's times and effort for us to be able to improve those systems. So where we are right now, we're still monitoring those systems with the help of Dinet College. So Dinet College is actually leading this project. Excuse me, it's leading the monitoring project, Neil Roy Singer. And we have a plan of testing the systems every couple of months and conducting surveys, and we will do that for at least a whole year. So we can have data that we can give, solid data to give back to the community about the performance, what they think, and manuals, operations, whatever they need. Okay. So now that we talked about the project island, I want to talk to you a little bit about results. I'm talking about all these assessments. So what did we get? So I'll talk about the first two systems that we installed, and they stayed in the community houses for a year and a half. During that time, it's not like we're not going in the community or not checking. We would travel in the community and have constant communication with the community members to ensure that everything was working fine. And we're monitoring, we were collecting samples. So we had two systems. One system operated as expected. The second system showed some surprising results. And if you can't see it right now in this slide, I'll walk you through that. So if you look at unit 2, that's the feed container. You see that there is basically not a lot of coliforms or E. coli or any viruses. But if you look on the effluent of the water, well, one system has everything zero. It's performing. It's doing exactly what we wanted to do. It's removing all the pathogens. We see that a couple of our pathogens actually have very high values. And those were very surprising. So we had to go back and figure out what is the main difference between those systems. And the main difference between those systems is how they were being operated. So intermittent operation. So one of the households was using the system every day continuously for many times during the day. So the water was flowing continuously through the whole system and the tank. In the other system, the community member was using the system for only on the weekends. Sometimes it would take 2 weeks. So what that created, the intermittent operation, it created an environment that allowed pathogens to grow inside the tank and inside the systems. And then your typical one pass through our UV lamp was not enough to actually inactivate those pathogens. Okay, so this is really important. So now, what is the solution to that? So we had to go back into the board, and we had to do now bench scale experiments to figure out how to overcome that issue, that challenge of the intermittent operation. Okay, but what did we do in the meantime with the community member? That was our quick solution. Dr. Hakim and Neil Roy Singer from Dinet College, they did a very a test where they collected samples from that specific system after it hasn't been used for a while, over different increments of time, but at different locations of the systems. And we figured out that if you recirculate, even if the system hasn't been used for a very long time, if you recirculate your water for about 10 minutes, then it completely drops all of the pathogens to zero. So out of an extra precaution to the community and to everyone, we asked that if people are not using the system every day, that they perform this recirculation. So that was our quick solution. Now, we took all this information and we came back here at the U of A, and we have developed a whole bench scale testing to figure out more on the fundamentals and understanding of this, how intermittency plays an important role on point of use disinfection systems overall. So our big question was to determine how are those point of use systems for traditional mercury lamps. Those are the most common lamps that you will find from UV, but more novel UV LED lamps that they are a lot more sustainable, can be operated to provide the UV dose that the EPA requires for these pathogens inactivations under intermittent operation. You see our systems that we built in the lab. And what did we test for? We test different flow rates because that affects how long the water will stay into our reactor. Whether we should do batch operations, so that means recirculation. How long do we need to recirculate our water to ensure disinfection? Warm up, because the mercury lamps require at least a few minutes of warming up before they actually perform. That's in the manufacturer specification. We knew that. And then test different UVTs. And what does UVT means? That's the transmittance of the water. This is a measure that we use to quantify how transparent the water is. So typically drinking water is at about 95 to 98% has a UVT. So it's pretty transparent. Well, if you look at wastewater, you're closer to 60, 70% UVT. Okay, so this is different qualities of water. This is a metric that we use specifically for disinfection. So we'll see how this relates with our results. Okay. So the first thing we had to do, we actually did, is we tested our system for a dose UV dose response curve. And I'll explain to you what that means. That means how much, what inactivation of the pathogens do different UV doses give us, okay? So what you see in this graph is on your x-axis, you see UV dose. This is the intensity of the lamp. And then on the y-axis, you see log inactivation. This is the typical measurement of disinfection, of how much of those pathogens we have removed. The upper and lower bound, those are bounds set by the EPA. So a UV disinfection system has to fall within those lines. And now to the most important part of this work, what you see is our red, those are our experimental labs in the lab. They fall perfectly in the middle between the upper and the lower bound. That means that our lamp, this is specifically for our mercury lamp, it's working great. So we follow, basically, we follow the EPA's guidance and the guidance for the manual for compliance with filtration and disinfection requirements for public water systems. So that is what you see here. You might ask me, what is MS2, Vicky? Well, MS2 is a bacteriophage, which basically infects E. coli. We use MS2, and EPA recommends that you use MS2 as a surrogate for human enteric. We use it as a surrogate to enteric viruses for testing for water quality, and specifically in disinfection studies, because it's non-pathogenic, but it mimics virus behavior in water. So we have a win-win situation here, and that's what we tested for, and to follow also to be able to compare with the EPA guidelines. Okay, so now to our more specific results. Okay, let's talk first about this graph that we see here. This was conducted for a 98% UVT. Again, UVT stands for ultraviolet transmittance. It measures how much UV light passes through water, and it's expressed as a percentage of a specific wavelength. UVT matters in disinfection because this is the critical parameter for UV validation, if the disinfection process works, again. So the higher percentage of the UVT, the clearer, the more transparent the water is, right? That doesn't mean that it doesn't have pathogens, but there is no cloudiness into the water. So what you see here, the RED stands for the reduction equivalent dose, and that's basically the dose of the UV lamp. So we're measuring how does the UV lamp dose changes as we're changing the flow rate through our reactor, the lamp, okay? And what you can see here, the blue dots is for a typical mercury lamp, and that's very, very high. And for the LED lamp is that red line that you see here. And even the LED, which is supposedly has less of a less intensity, it still falls between the bounds of what the EPA recommends, whether the water is going to be Class A or Class B. So that means it creates water that is Class A. So this is great news. So if we have pretty clear water in terms of transmittance, which was just for as a reference, the water from all 3 springs was at 98%, so very clean water. Both lamps will be able to disinfect the water at one pass. This is great news. Okay, so what if we have now water that has a lower UVT, like what you see here in this graph will be the lines that they're dotted, that they're dashed. If you have lower transmittance, that means that your water has more, it's less transparent. It's not necessarily, you might not be able to see it with visible eye, but we have the equipment here that can tell you what's the transmittance of the water. And you can see that immediately, as soon as the quality of the water drops quite a bit, 7%, it's a big drop. The mercury lamp is still providing enough dosage and intensity of the lamp to disinfect the water at a Class A, even at the higher flow rates. In the LED lamp, though, however, you fall below the Class B certification for all different flow rates. That means if you let even your water go super slow and have a lot of contact time with your UV lamp, you will still not disinfect your water where it needs to be, which we want it to be in between the Class B and the Class A, or even above the Class A, okay? So this is what this data are telling us. Okay, so what does that mean in terms of economics? Okay, so we performed this analysis for our system for a 10-year lifetime. That means that you have your system for 10 years and it's operating. The limiting factor here are mostly the solar panels, because those are the solar panels, even though they say a lifetime of 20 years, I don't think it always reaches this 20 years. But our assumptions anyways for our design was a 10-year lifetime design for 24 gallons per person. That's according to the UN. With 3 people per household, and using the cost of power that we have here in Tucson. That's for preliminary results. And what you see here is the cost of the blue bar, that will be for a mercury lamp, and then the red bar would be for an LED lamp. The LED system is a lot cheaper, as you can see, per 100 gallons. The mercury lamp is still a lot cheaper than hauling water, right? And it's below $1, so it's still pretty competitive. The shaded area that you see here is because the manufacturer of the mercury lamp recommends at every year, no matter what, whether the lamp is out or not, we should be changing it. So that's why the cost increases a lot. If you don't change the lamp, then the cost is very comparable to the LED lamps. Okay. So then we wanted to look a little bit more in details. And what you see here is the cost, and we're only looking specifically for the lamps here, the cost of the lamps, of what they're adding to the total system. It's not the total system cost. This is more specific for the lamps and the UV lamps. And what you see, what the systems cost, its lamp cost, what's the energy requirement. And the one thing I want to point out is if you have 2 different qualities of water, then you can see how the UV dose changes, right? So the mercury lamp, it's always performing above the minimum of what the EPA requires. The LED lamp, especially at the 70 UVT, it does not reach that requirement. So does that mean that we should not use the LED systems or use the LED systems? Well, the LED systems are actually pretty sustainable. So we wouldn't recommend that we take it completely out of the picture because we can do this recirculation. You can potentially have recirculation. And again, this is for a scenario where the water is pretty dirty. 70% the water will not have good water quality. Okay, so then let's look at the economics, considering the worst case scenario for the water quality. Our systems are very comparable on the cost. The LED will go higher because we're now recirculating the water for about 6 to 7 minutes in order to achieve that that intensity that it's required by the EPA. And that's how the cost comes into play if you have water quality that it's harder to treat for. But you can achieve that UV disinfection potential by just recirculating for a little bit longer. It will just increase the price of the water at that point. Okay, so future work in terms of the bend scale. We're trying to collect more data in batch mode, so then we can figure out exactly what's that contact time, the concentration of the dose times the time that we need to have the water be contacted, right? So then we can go with all this data and give them to the community and say, here's how the system should be operated if you have XYZ, if the system hasn't been used for a long time. So we can actually give tested guidelines. We still compare the UV and the mercury systems because there is no data actually for the UV LED, so that's pretty new. And overall, the LED lamps are a lot more sustainable than the mercury lamp. Plus, you don't have to think about where do I throw this mercury lamp, which has mercury in it, versus the LED is a lot. It's benign. It doesn't have a harmful hazard chemical in it. And if operating conditions matter, can the UV LED lamps be more suitable for long-term intermittent use? So those are questions still that we're trying to answer in our bend scale study. The next steps overall for our project is continuous dissemination of our data. So improving our system manuals. So as of now, we have manuals for all systems, and we try to, with the feedback of the community, we're presenting the data and sending the data as soon as we get anything. We're relaying all this information to the community. We are doing studies to try to increase the energy component, because that's a need of the community that they talked to us before. So those systems, yes, they have enough energy to produce water, but they also, you can charge your phone or you can use it for other applications, nighttime illumination. So we're figuring out what's the best way to do that. We're continuing to do our lab work so we can provide more answers to the community. And then we're doing techno-economic and life cycle assessments as well for our systems, because those are important metrics for whether a system is sustainable or not. And then the next step we want to do is check our system for very tough organisms, for organisms that you wouldn't find in the Monument Valley Park, such as adenovirus, which actually is a self-healing, it can heal itself virus. But so we know exactly what are the boundaries of the system. And with that, I want to provide finish up with detailed acknowledgements of the team. As I said, this project would not be happening if it wasn't for Dr. Tommy Rock and Dr. Carletta Chief and Dr. Kelly Simmons-Potter and Dr. Sazia Hakim from Diné College. And then I want to highlight all the students. A lot of the work that I presented today is Lynn Carrolls, who's a PhD student in our group. The systems have been built by, and all of our designs have been realized by Hunter Goodenhoff, and of course, Neil Roy Singer, who's pivotal to this group, who's collecting and doing all the sampling analysis for all the systems that they're out on the field, and many others at the U of A. And with that, hopefully we have enough time for questions. Thank you for listening.
That was awesome. Thank you, Dr. Karanikola. So for anybody who might have questions, please feel free to either put them in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, I can just call on you directly from the chat. But again, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I have a question for you, if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, one thing that I'm curious about. So what inspired you to focus your research on community-based participatory approaches? Like how that all came about?
Okay, that's a great question. So I was very fortunate to be mentored by people like Dr. Chief and Dr. Arnold. And so since I was on my PhD focused on off-the-grid water treatment systems and remote communities. And by reading a lot and understanding, because unless you read or somebody tells you to read, you don't understand or get a good picture of how people that they live so close to the land and their livelihood depends, right, on the the cohabitation, or what's the word, living in harmony with the environment. Unless you read about that and you see that, then you might not know how important it is for the survival of all of us. So people in Monument Valley Park adore their area, and they're rightfully so. That area is magical, it's beautiful, have so many things to teach like me that I've been living in an urban environment, of how to be living in harmony with the whole environment, right? So it's something that has been driving all of our projects, I think. Understanding this, how important it is for us for that symbiosis with our environment. So that's how I had good mentorship who allowed me to expand my horizons. And from there, the community were so willingly wanted to share information with us. So that's has really driven me doing this work. And all you have to do is be patient and trust the process. And as you're working with the communities, then fundamental research questions come up that we can work in the lab, that they are highly connected with the work that we're doing within the community, but they're still independently done in the laboratory, right? And a student can get a PhD because they can work on fundamental work in the lab. So it's probably the most rewarding work I've ever done in my life, this work.
Thank you. No, I love that answer. And I think that's a huge part that you bring up, that idea of unless we engage with communities, we really won't know like what these projects mean to community, the importance, just their love for the land. And so that's something that really sticks out. And so on the flip side of that, we have a question in the chat from Caprice, and that question is saying, so within this work, is there ever resistance in the community?
Specifically with the Monument Valley Park community, I've never experienced any resistance. The community is driving the projects, and because the community is driving the projects, there's really no resistance. Actually, what happened in the last time we were there, I didn't mention that, but the officials from the chapter house, the Ojedo chapter house, came down to visit us while we were updating one of our systems, because as we're updating our system through the timeline, every time we go back, we update the older systems. So based on the feedback, we're updating all of our designs in the communities every time we go back. So the chapter house officials came and they were really excited. And now the chapter house wants us to help to even go outside of the community. And there's a lot of interest for people that actually from the community that want to understand more about the systems and potentially help out to do it themselves for the communities, which is huge. So the proliferation is coming through the community.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also have a question. If I can go on?
Of course, go ahead, Abdul.
Okay. Thank you so much for this great presentation. And my name is Abdul. I'm a grad student at UNM, University of New Mexico, here in Albuquerque. And I've also been working with water, with indigenous community on the Navajo Nation, specifically Torion chapter. And so I've also had the opportunity to visit the reservation and had a meeting with the Club C chapter leaders. And so I really like the approach, trying to get the community to be like partners of this particular project. But my question is that do you see these models, this kind of research replicating itself in other communities? What are the future plans of the projects such as the one that you're doing? Do you see it as applicable to other communities, or do you intend to replicate same in other communities that that are not also captured in your project?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So if we look at it as an engineer, the system itself can be replicated for any situation, right? And water. But if we look at the community, every community has their own interests and needs. So that will be dependent on the conversation. So I really want to highlight that the most important part of this work was the continuous community discussions from the very early on, without trying to come as a team there, without leaving our own biases outside of the conversation. So it's very important to let the community lead on their needs. It's very important to let the community lead on even on the design. How do you want it to look? And I can bring examples of what that even means, right? How does a community member potentially can have feedback on just seeing a drawing? And it does have, because the first iteration of the system we built was ugly. I wouldn't want it in my house. So we got feedback of, can you make it look like this or X? Can this go here? So we literally got feedback from how should it look, right? Or about the flavor. So all those things are very specific to the community we're working. So I guess to create a framework for every community, you will have to somebody will need to help us to do that, because I don't think I have the expertise to do that. Would be, how do you create a framework for that initial part that is so critical to lead the rest of the design and the success of the project? So for this project to be successful, we have to make a commitment as a team that we don't leave. We're staying with the community for a long time. And that's at least my intention. I'm not planning to go drop the system and never go back. The intention is to keep on going back for a long, long time and have continuous connections with the systems and the community. Because there's nobody else right now that can take ownership. So that's a very important part. So I don't know if I answered your question, but it's a very good question that I don't have 100% a good answer, recognizing the difficulty of doing work in remote communities, right?
Yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. And so we have a question in the chat here from Sarah. So beyond the monitoring phase of the project, I'm curious, what are the anticipated costs and timelines for updating and or repairing the systems? How are the communities preparing for that? How will the community continue to know whether or not the systems are working well into the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the anticipated cost, we knew that because those are demonstrations. Just remember that those are not systems that you can go and buy them from a manufacturer and then you can come and service them, right? The components are off the shelf, but the rest of the system, we still have to put it together and figure out how to put it together. So we had contingency plans if things go wrong, right? At the first iteration, we are expecting, as the systems are getting proliferated and more iterations are coming by, then they will need less updating. But the updating costs were not that high. A system like this costs about $1,100 to $1,200, which brings down the cost of water to about $0.7 per 100 gallons. And the changes that we have done so far were not more than $150 to update them. So unless there is a problem, there was a problem with the battery cost $400. So that was an expensive cost. So we have a contingency plan for that, because we know as demonstration units, this will happen until we figure out a steady state for operation of those systems. And then the second part of the question, how's the community preparing for that? So actually, especially the last time, we have multiple community members looking at the system, trying to understand what we're doing. They're looking at the training manuals. Every time they had a problem, they were able to troubleshoot it themselves. They called us, so I answered the phone, and within 2 minutes, they were able to figure it out. So the way we are designing this, and when we are doing the training, it somehow works. So we also, that's why the Net College is a very integral part of this project. And again, they're leading. So the Net College is very close. Neil can drive within an hour to be there in the community if there is an issue also, right? Now, long-term success of this project will be somebody to take ownership of the systems, right? That would be, the ideal situation would be a utility, right? But as of now, no utility has come forward for that. So then we're working with no profits to make this happen, the colleges and the universities. And we're continuously testing them.
Thank you. And so before we get ready to wrap up for today, just wanted to see if we have any other questions. And then we have Dr. Samuel Moore, affiliated with UCLA, and said he stepped away for 10 minutes. Did he miss anything about data sovereignty with the nation for their data contribution?
Yeah, so the data go back to the community. It's the community's data. Any data we're collecting, this is going back to the community. Any data surveying that we have collected, that has been approved by IRB and the Navajo Nation IRB, and we are continuously presenting at the board any information we have. Yeah, I mean, and we're working with the IRS, so any data potentially collected, it's the communities and the Net College also. So a lot of this data that Neil is all the water samples and stuff, they go to the Net College, and the Net College is the owners of the data and the community, not us.
Thank you again. And so thank you, Dr. Karanikola, just for sharing all of the awesome work that you're doing in community and making it accessible for us to understand. Really appreciate you making that time for us here. And a big thank you to, of course, to everybody who joined and our co-sponsors, the Indigenous Resilience Center, the UA Sloan Indigenous Graduate Partnership, the Water Resources Research Center, the Native Fuse Alliance, and the Office of Societal Impact for making the seminar possible. We definitely want to invite you to join us for the next talk in fall 2025 Native Voices in STEM Seminar Series, which is on Wednesday, December 10th, featuring Dr. Sherry DeVore. Before we officially close, we encourage students who would like to stay online for a more informal Q&A to do so. So really, it's just a great opportunity to ask additional questions, seek mentorship, or engage in smaller group discussion with today's speaker. Thank you all, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Also, a quick note, there is a link in the chat for a survey we put out just for feedback, because we want to continuously improve the way that we want to continuously improve the Native Voices in STEM seminar, and that will come out as an email as well. So we will now be transitioning to the student session. So thank you, everyone.